Today's story is so tender and dangerous that it could make a hardened gunslinger lower his rifle set in the restless heart of the Old West, where the wind smells of dust and cedar, and every horizon hides a secret. That was a land where faith clashed with desire, and where two souls could meet like sparks in dry grass. It began with something small, a pair of bare feet in a quiet river bend, but it was enough to shake an entire destiny. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Mabel Hart had grown up learning to distrust the very skin she lived in. Edith Hart had warned her that longing was a rattler hiding beneath a woman's ribs, waiting for the right hour to sink its fangs into her decency. From the pulpit, Amos Calder thundered about the frailty of daughters of Eve, saying that the first woman's failings still crept through families like bad blood in the veins. Mabel had listened until those lessons framed the walls of her mind. She was 22 and had never felt a man's lips on hers. It wasn't that offers had been scarce. She carried the kind of beauty found in prairie blossoms, soft at a glance, yet stubborn against the wind. Her hair shone like ripe wheat in September, and her gray eyes changed with her temper the way the sky does before a storm. The Dust Hollow boys had come calling for years, hats twisting in hopeful hands. But when she faced them, she felt only emptiness. There was no quickening in her chest, no warmth in her middle, only the weight of duty and a strong wish to run clear out of sight. Amos Calder had begun to fret, saying an unmarried daughter at her age was a shameful burden. He had started talks with Lyle Mercer, a widower old enough to be her father, a man with 3 motherless children who needed tending. The wedding was marked for October. Then July arrived and turned her life sideways. Mabel walked to the river to escape the stifling rooms of the parsonage and the heavier press of the future chosen for her. She found a quiet bend where the willows dipped their green hair into the water, making a leafy chapel of coolness. She slipped off her shoes and stockings, an act her father would have called scandalous, and let her bare feet drift in the current. That was where the stranger came upon her. She heard him before she saw him, the gentle scuff of moccasins on the bank. When she looked up, her heart went still. He was tall and spare hair black as wet coal falling past his shoulders, eyes so dark they seemed to carry the night inside them. He wore buckskin leggings under a plain cotton shirt, a band of beadwork around his arm, and he held a fishing line as if he had been minded only for quiet sport. For a long breath, neither of them moved. Every sermon she knew told her to scream and flee. The tales of the untamed West painted men like him as danger made flesh, yet her limbs would not obey. She remained on the shore toes in the river, caught by his gaze. He spoke first, his English smooth with a faint music. "I didn't aim to scare you. I'll be on my way." "Wait." The word leapt out before she could bite it back. She couldn't have said why she wanted him to stay, only that something in his weary kindness had reached past her fear and touched a place she could not name. He paused as she asked, calm and patient. "I'm not frightened," Mabel said, which was only half true, "just taken by surprise." "A woman alone ought to be wary when a stranger walks up," he answered. He studied her with a slight tilt of his head. "You're the preacher's daughter, aren't you? Folks around here know Amos Calder and the girl he keeps close." "Yes." "I'm Kiona. Most people just call me the Indian who works at Dust Hollow Ranch." There was no bite in his tone, only plain fact, yet heat crept up Mabel's neck. "I'm Mabel." An awkward space lay between them. She suddenly noticed her loose hair, her naked feet, the improper picture she made. She ought to cover herself to leave at once, yet she sat feeling a strange charge in the air. "The fishing runs well here," Kiona said. "I come most days after work." "Didn't know this was your corner." "It isn't. I've never been before. I only needed a breath from the heat and other things." Her voice faltered. What do you mean? He shrugged, and the motion drew her eyes to the breadth of his shoulders. I've seen you in town. She spoke of Lyle Mercer and the wedding set for October that hung over her days like a sentence read aloud in a courthouse. She told him how hollow she felt when she tried to picture the years ahead, how it seemed her life had been mapped by other hands. And she was only a rider tied to a stagecoach, bound for a town she had never chosen. Do you care for him? Kiona asked. The man you're meant to wed, Mabel, let out a thin, brittle laugh. I've traded maybe a dozen words with him in all my years. He studies me the way a rancher studies a brood mare he's thinking of buying. Love isn't part of the bargain. Then why agree? Because there isn't a door-marked choice for a girl like me. Because Amos Calder made the match. Because a woman without a ring is called a burden by Hollow Creek folk and a subject for wagging tongues. She drew her feet from the water and wrapped her arms around her knees. I was raised to believe what I want counts for nothing, that I'm only a vessel for obedience and duty. Kiona fell silent for a spell. When he answered, his voice was low as wind through cottonwoods. My people say every soul is born with its own spirit, not owned by family or tribe, but its own. To crush that spirit under other folks' expectations is a slow kind of killing. Mabel met his gaze in earnest and felt something loosen inside her chest. And what does your spirit ask for, Kiona? His dark eyes held hers, and the intensity in them made her stomach flutter in a way she'd never known. Right now, it wants to keep speaking with you. It wants to learn more about that bird in the cage and whether she might find the nerve to spread her wings. Mabel's mouth went dry. That's a risky thing to say. Maybe. But I've never been much good at safe. They found each other again the next day and the day after that. Mabel invented errands and small lies, slipping from the parsonage whenever she could, and always making her way back to the Willow Bend by the river. Kiona was always there, waiting as if his afternoons held no better purpose than keeping company with a preacher's daughter promised to another man. They spoke of everything and nothing, dreams, old memories, the way a childhood smells after rain. He taught her words from his own tongue, smiling at her clumsy sounds. She told him of the novels she hid beneath her mattress, the sort Amos Calder would have burned had he known. They argued about faith and politics, and whether the West would ever become one land or only swallow those who tried to tame it. Little by little, the space between them grew smaller. It began with chance touches, his fingers grazing hers when he handed her a wildflower, her shoulder leaning against his as they watched the sun sink red over the hills. Each brush sent a warm spark through Mabel's body, lighting places she had no name for. She had been taught such stirrings were sinful signs of the serpent waking, yet they felt nothing like sin. They felt like waking from a long, hard winter. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Kiona kissed her. They were sitting beneath the broadest willow, hidden from the world by a curtain of green leaves. Mabel had been describing a foolish dream half remembered, and he watched her with that steady attention that made her feel as if she mattered more than anyone alive. She faltered mid-sentence, caught by the look in his eyes. What she whispered. You're beautiful, you know that. Mabel shook her head. She'd been called pretty by men who wanted favors, but beautiful spoken like a blessing. No, she had never known that. You are, Kiona said. Not only your face, your spirit, the way you brighten when you speak of what you love, the way you fight that cage, even when you don't know you're fighting. He reached out slowly, giving her time to turn away, and brushed her cheek with his fingertips. You're the finest thing I've ever seen. Mabel ought to have pulled back, ought to have remembered her virtue and the sermons about the serpent in her heart. But but all she felt was the warmth of his hand and a fierce wish to lean closer. Kiona, she breathed, and his name sounded like permission. He kissed her. At first it was light a question more than a claim. His lips touched hers so gently she wondered if she had imagined it. Then she leaned forward in answer, and he made a low sound that shivered through her. His hand slid into her hair, steadying her head, while her palms found his chest, feeling the solid heat beneath his shirt. The kiss deepened, still careful, still unhurried, but with an undercurrent that set her whole body humming. She had no schooling in such things, no one to guide her before. Yet Kiona seemed to know the way. He showed her without words how to tilt her head, how to part her lips, how to breathe so she needn't break away. When they finally drew apart, Mabel was trembling. "I'm sorry," Kiona said. He didn't look sorry at all. He looked like a man who'd witnessed a wonder. "I should have asked first." "No." Mabel shook her head, trying to gather the loose threads of her thoughts. "No, I wanted it. I didn't even know I did, but I surely did. I still do." Kiona smiled, and the change in his face was like sunlight, breaking through cloud, making him look younger, easier, full of bright life. "Then may I do it again?" She only nodded, her voice nowhere to be found, and he drew her into his arms and kissed her once more. This time the moment stretched longer, far longer. Kiona took his time, as if he meant to learn every secret her mouth could tell him, the shape of her lips and the small sigh she made when he found a place she favored. Mabel softened against him, the tight knot of her nerves melting into a warm, flowing heat deep in her middle. All her life, she had been told wanting was perilous a road that led to disgrace. Yet this felt nothing like peril. It felt like walking through a door she had been seeking since childhood, like finding a lost piece of herself and setting it where it belonged. They kissed until the sun slid low, and the air cooled until the shadows lengthened across the water. They kissed until her lips were tender and alive, until every part of her seemed to hum with a new kind of breath. When Kiona finally eased back, his dark eyes heavy with a meaning she was only beginning to grasp, she found herself leaning toward him, unwilling to let the moment end. "We ought to stop," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "If we don't, I may not have the strength to." Mabel understood his meaning even with her sheltered raising. She understood, and some hidden corner of her wished he would lose that strength. But Kiona held firmer reins than she did. He brushed one last kiss to her brow, gentle as a blessing, and carefully freed himself from her arms. "Tomorrow," he said. "Will you come tomorrow?" "Yes." The word burst out quick and eager. "Yes, I'll come." Kiona smiled again, that bright, aching smile. "Then I'll be counting the hours." Mabel walked home, as if her feet hardly touched the ground, her body still warm from his hands, her mind spinning with the sighs of what had passed between them. She had been kissed, she had welcomed it, she wanted more. The serpent, she thought of Edith Hart's warnings about the snake in a woman's heart. But when she searched herself, she found no serpent, only warmth and a tender longing, the first green shoots of something that might grow into love, if she dared to tend it. The days that followed felt like a waking dream. Every afternoon, Mabel slipped away to the Willow Bend, and every afternoon, Kiona was there. They talked, yes, trading stories and hopes, but the talking soon gave way to kisses, and the kisses led to a feeling she had no name for. Kiona treated her with a patience close to reverence. He seemed to know she was traveling a country with no maps, that each sensation was new and needed time. He never pressed, never claimed, never made her feel she owed him more than she freely gave. Yet what she gave grew richer by the day. She learned the flavor of his mouth, the coffee he favored at dawn, the wild mint he chewed when the sun was high. She learned the low sound he made when her fingers moved through his hair, a soft hum that trembled against her lips. She learned there were many kinds of kisses, sweet as sugar, slow as summer rivers, fierce as sudden storms, and each kind lit a different flame in her. She learned she had been misled all her life. Wanting was not a serpent. It was no curse or shame or weakness. It was plain as breathing, bright as daylight. It was the body saying yes to living, to pleasure, to closeness. And Kiona, with his steady hands and endless patience, was teaching her to trust that truth. One afternoon, near a month after that first kiss, Mabel reached the grove to find Kiona troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, settling beside him. "Your father preached today," he said. "I heard from the dust-hollow hands." His jaw was tight. He spoke of the danger of mixing with heathens, of keeping Christian blood untainted. Her stomach dropped. "He doesn't know about us. He doesn't need names to do harm." His words carry weight. They make neighbors see foes where none stand. Kiona turned to her eyes grave. "Mabel, if anyone learns what we've been doing, I don't care." The words startled them both. She hadn't known she meant to say them until they were spoken, yet once they hung in the air, she knew they were true. She didn't care for Amos Calder's sermons or Hollow Creek folks' judgments or the future laid out without her consent. She cared for this man who had shown her who she might be when fear let go. "You should care," Kiona said gently. "Your name, your family. My name is a cage. My family has only ever seen a thing to be traded, and the life they chose for me." Mabel reached up and took his face in her hands, a boldness as she had learned these past weeks. "I don't want that life, Kiona. I want something different. I want something true." "What do you want?" The question rested between them like a loaded rifle. Mabel considered all the proper replies. She could offer the modest words Edith Hart would have praised. But she was finished with being proper, finished with wearing the shape others carved for her. "I want you to kiss me again," she said. "I want you to keep kissing me until every lie I was taught about my own body fades clean away. I want you to show me what wanting feels like without shame, without fear. I want—" Her courage thinned before she could finish. Yet Kiona understood. He always did. "Mabel," he said, and her name in his voice felt like warm hands on cold skin. "Are you certain I've never been more certain of anything?" He kissed her, then, slow and sure, with a hunger he had kept bridled for weeks. She gasped against his mouth, startled by the sudden heat, but she did not pull back. She leaned nearer instead, letting her body speak what her tongue could not. "More. I want more. Show me everything." Kiona eased her down onto the soft grass under the willows, cradling her head with his arm. The leaves above swayed, throwing restless patterns of light across their faces. He held himself over her weight on his elbows and looked down with such gentleness that tears pricked her eyes. "We'll go easy," he said. "We stop the moment you say. Your word rules this ground, Mabel. Nothing happens you don't choose. I know." And she did know deep in the marrow of her bones. "I trust you." He shut his eyes as if her trust weighed more than gold. Then he bent and kissed her again. He kissed her until breath left her lungs, then traced her jaw, her ear, the tender hollow below. Mabel heard sounds escape her. She had never made small whimpers and soft gasps born beyond her will. Kiona answered each one, lingering where she welcomed him, moving on when she sought more. He pressed his mouth to her neck, sending a warm trail down her throat, then brushed her collarbone, touching skin no one had ever touched. She arched toward him, fingers clenching in his shirt, her body learning motions no one had taught. "Kiona," she whispered, and his name felt like prayer, like pleading, like promise. "I'm here," he answered, voice rough with the strain of holding back. I'm right here. He kissed the hollow of her throat, where her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. He kissed the fabric of her dress in a way that drove her near wild, making her wish she could tear it aside. He returned to her mouth, catching her gasp as her hips lifted to meet him. Time slipped its reins. The sun crossed the sky, and she never saw it. The world beyond the willow wall vanished. There was only Kiona, his lips, his hands, the weight of him above her, teaching her body a language it had been born knowing, but never allowed to speak. He did not go beyond kisses, even when her body begged for more, even when she pulled him closer and wound her legs around him. He kept that careful command. He was showing her the breadth of what could be waking her to pleasure. But he would not steal her virtue on a riverbank, with no promise of tomorrow. Why, she asked, flushed and trembling, and more alive than she had ever been. Why are you stopping? Kiona rested his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard. Because I love you, and the first time I make love to you will be as your husband, not as your secret. The words cut through the haze, sharp as cold water. Mabel stared up at him. What I want to marry you, Mabel. I want to take you somewhere folks don't know Amos Calder's name or care about the color of my skin. I want a life with you that's honest, where neither of us hides our hearts. You love me. I've loved you since that first day by the river, when you told me to wait and I saw the bravery tucked behind your fear. He brushed a kiss to the corner of her mouth, gentle as dawn. I love you, Mabel Hart, and if you'll have me, I'll spend every day proving it. Her eyes brimmed over. She had been taught love was a foolish dream that ruined women, that marriage was only a bargain, a handing over from father to husband. Never once had she been shown love could look like this patience fire and respect braided into something stronger than any sermon. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. Yes, I'll marry you. Kiona's face lit with that sunrise smile, and he kissed her tears away one by one. Then we leave tomorrow, he said. Before the sun climbs. I've saved a little money enough to start fresh somewhere else. We can wed on the road in a town that knows neither of us. Your father may hunt for us, but let him. He won't find us, and even if he does, you'll be my wife beyond his reach. It was a reckless notion, a perilous leap against every lesson Mabel Hart had been taught about obedience and a woman's proper station. Yet lying there in Kiona's arms, her body still glowing with newborn desire, and her heart crowded with a fresh, bright love, she found she could not trouble herself over any of those old rules. She was finished with cages, finished with behaving, finished with denying the spirit that belonged to her alone. Tomorrow, she said, before the sun climbs, I'll be here. Kiona kissed her once more, slow and deep and heavy with promise. Then I'll count the hours again. Mabel laughed a clear note of joy and drew him down for another kiss. There would be time enough for plans and bundles and the small chores of their leaving. But in that single moment, she wanted only to want to love without a grain of shame. The innocence she had been ordered to guard had slipped away beneath Kiona's patient mouth, and in its place, something better had taken root, something real, breathing wholly her own. She was no longer a bird beating against bars. She was a woman standing on the edge of flight, and with the morning she would spread her wings at last. They rode west when the sun was young, two riders pushing toward a future no one had drawn for them. Behind lay all Mabel had known. Amos Calder's church, Edith Hart's chill, the heavy expectations that had nearly broken her spirit. Ahead waited uncertainty, adventure, the wide unknown of a life chosen freely. She was afraid, of course she was. Yet for the first time the fear felt small beside the hope. Kiona reached across and took her hand as their horses walked side by side along the dusty road. "No regrets?" he asked. Mabel looked at him. This man who had spent hours teaching her body to trust, who had turned her guarded innocence into living desire with nothing but patience and love. She thought of the instant she had said yes, the instant she had chosen him over everything. "No regrets," she answered. "Not a single one." Kiona lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, and that familiar warmth bloomed again in her chest, and the warmth that had begun the day a stranger by the river saw past her, fear to the courage beneath. The road unrolled before them, long and uncertain. Hard days would come, she knew, judgment, struggle, the trials that follow any path that the world dislikes. Yet there would also be this love, this wanting, this partnership of equals. She had once been innocent. She was not now, and riding toward her new life with Kiona beside her, Mabel understood that innocence had never been a treasure at all. It had been a chain that bound her to a life slowly draining her breath. Now she was free, and she meant never to let anyone cage her again. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.